two instances of data being used in unexpected ways. NBC News has an analysis of how data collected by your car, which is smart of course, that tracks location data, doors opening, recordings of calls or text threads, and call logs. Both the car's onboard computer and the infotainment system can be useful for extracting information, and in many cases without requiring a passcode or login, making it easier for police or other people to search. Meanwhile, spy maker NSO reused real phone location data of several thousand people when demonstrating its COVID-19 contact tracking system to governments and journalists. When trying to sell the software, the company used real data and exposed the data, which was quickly secured when reported. So why do we care? How about we start the year with two Black Mirror stories? Did the manufacturers think through the misuse of their technologies? That was my takeaway here. They probably didn't, which opens up an entire space for being that pessimist and working with customers to think that way. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you, which takes on a whole new meaning when you apply it to technology in this way. I'm really looking for these new consulting opportunities that should start to be more front and center, and we'll update on SolarWinds in that context later in the show. Apple failed to convince a U.S. court that security vendor Corellium infringed its copyrights. Corellium offers a way to virtualize both iPhones and Android devices for developers and security researchers to use. Apple tried to buy the company in 2018, and after the deal fell apart, filed the lawsuit. Why do we care? This we care about because of the broad implications around emulation and virtualization. If Apple had won this one, it could have far-reaching copyright implications for other companies using these technologies. Instead, we can know that the logical conclusion that the company wasn't selling its products indiscriminately and in a damaging way helped protect the larger ecosystem. A standalone SolarWinds MSP piece before digging into the larger SolarWinds story. The division has announced that SolarWinds MSP will rebrand as Enable as part of their potential spin-out. This was the name of the company acquired in 2013 by SolarWinds and later merged with LogicNow in 2016 to form SolarWinds MSP. Why do we care? I made this stand alone because it's just a very different type of story than the rest of the SolarWinds stories. First off, the spin-off is totally happening. You don't talk about it like this if it's not, and then layer in the hack, and the MSP group wants to get as far away from the parent as they possibly can. Now, let's learn some lessons on branding. Leaders in the company are claiming this is the roots of the company. That's why this is a fail. They are explicitly citing that the past is why they are dusting off a 20-year-old name. What instead it does is remind us that their core technologies are also 20 years old. How do I know I'm right? You'll remember this statement now every time you think of the name. And thus, your lesson. If you're trying to step into the future and position yourself as a leading company in a new market or a new position, don't look to the past. You don't get paid on blood, sweat, and tears equity in any capacity, including marketing. Let's do a roundup of what has changed with SolarWinds hack since the last time we talked. SolarWinds has updated their advisory for the Supernova malware, which included additional information on how it was leveraged. Microsoft has revealed that its systems were infiltrated further and that hackers were able to, quote, view source code in a number of source code repositories, end quote. The company has also indicated that they believe the end goal of the compromise was to pivot to customers' cloud assets. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency has asked all U.S. government agencies to update their installations by the end of 2020, and if they could not meet that deadline in the past, to take those systems offline. The New York Times is reporting that U.S. investigators are examining if the incursion originated in Eastern Europe, which is where some of SolarWinds software was engineered. I'm going to include a link to a description of the golden SAML technique used in this attack, which, quote, is an attack vector that can serve sophisticated attackers in their post-exploitation stages, allowing them to maintain persistency and gain access to different services in a convenient and stealthy manner, end quote. This incident marks the first time researchers have seen this in the wild. Additionally, I'm including a link to a piece on a 5-stage hack scale useful for differentiating these issues. Stage 0, the attackers have found or made an entry point to systems or the network, but haven't used it or took no action. Stage 1, hackers have control of a system but haven't moved beyond the system to the broader network. Stage 2, attackers have moved to the broader network and are in read-only mode, meaning they can read and steal data but not alter it. Stage 3, attackers have moved to the broader network and have write access to the network, meaning they can alter data as well as read and steal it. And Stage 4, attackers have administrative control of the broader network, meaning they can create accounts and new means of entry to the network as well as alter, read, and steal data. Not all levels are the same. In what is a major milestone, more than 400 Google engineers and other workers have formed a union. Called the Alphabet Workers Union, it's affiliated with the Communication Workers of America, which represents telecommunications and media workers in the US and Canada. Of note, the workers have indicated it's primarily an effort to give structure and longevity to activism at Google, rather than focusing on contracts. The union was planned in secret, and members will pay 1% of their salary in dues. It additionally will include contractors, which is considered unusual for a union. Why do we care? This is a big deal for the industry for 2 reasons. First, it's a major tech company now moving towards a union. It's been thought that tech workers wouldn't want to unionize. Well, that's proven wrong. I'd offer that it's not because of the traditional union reasons like wages and employee conditions, and more about lack of transparency and a disconnect between the company direction and the employees themselves. Second, it's a big deal because it does illustrate that good leaders need to look beyond the idea of just shareholders to stakeholders. In Europe, workers have seats on the board at many companies, and the result is closer alignment with company direction. Want to outperform the market? Here's some thinking on management to consider. Microsoft is planning a sweeping visual rejuvenation of Windows per a job listing posted by Microsoft. From the listing, quote, "On this team, you'll work with our key platform, Surface, and OEM partners to orchestrate and deliver a sweeping visual rejuvenation of Windows experiences to signal to our customers that Windows is back and ensure that Windows is considered the best user OS experience for customers." End quote. Since the initial listing, Microsoft quietly removed references to the sweeping visual rejuvenation. Why do we care? You can use job listings to tell what direction a company is going. And if you remember, a job listing tells us Microsoft is working on their cloud PC project too. I can't say I'm surprised by this news coming at this point. Windows 10 has been out in its current form for some time, and a UI refresh is done periodically to drive innovation and perceived value. Anytime one happens, of course, it's notable for anyone delivering technology services. If they're hiring, we're still a bit away from this, but a new project to be tracking. With the deal struck at the last minute, Brexit is officially done. In the deal, however, are some odd aspects, including mentions of Netscape Navigator. The mentions occur in the regulations around encryption, which are notably outdated, including SHA-1, which was broken in 2017, and 1024-bit RSA encryption, which is vulnerable to brute force attacks. The language appears to come from a 2008 EU document, which seems to indicate it was used recycling old text. Why do we care? So here is how regulation is often done. Like any document, a healthy bit of cut and paste. You need an encryption piece? Borrow it from the last time we needed an encryption piece. We care because of the example this highlights. You need to track and input on regulation affecting the industry because left to their own devices, lawmakers simply aren't expert enough to write it correctly. I don't believe including Netscape Navigator is a huge issue, but now we know the encryption standards set by law aren't right, and you can deliver subpar and insecure software now legally in this context. With 2020 behind us, several reports into the cost of internet shutdowns have been released, and notably, India topped the list for about 3/4 of the $4 billion lost worldwide due to internet outages and shutdowns, doubling from the previous year. At $2.8 billion, this cost reflects 8,927 hours of blackout. Why do we care? This measurement of cost of shutdowns is useful because it shows how vital broadband connectivity is to business, and here at a macro scale. Let's observe something. In India's case, this was deliberate government shutdowns of connectivity. However, there's an inverse to that. If a government isn't encouraging broadband growth and access, you're shutting out rather than shutting down access. That is an economic hit too. It's why I focus on broadband access. I believe this is holding back services opportunities, and I hope you do too, enough to speak up. Synergy Research Group, per CRN, has data on cloud growth in data centers, which is massive, spurred on by COVID-19. Over 80% of the revenue generated by the leading 20 hyperscale data center operators came from cloud, digital services, and online activity sales. Dominating the list, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. Why do we care? So we care because there's an inclination to watch server growth and assume it's SMB-style servers. It's not. Your direction, clearly the growth is all in cloud. How can you get this capacity into the hands of your customers? How can you leverage to drive to the cloud more? And are you moving far above it to the business logic? I've covered right to repair before on the show, now again. Digital rights activists need to petition the Library of Congress every 3 years for exemptions to Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which says that breaking copyright protection to fix a device is a breach of the manufacturer's copyright. Of note, technology like video game consoles are an example. Microsoft no longer repairs broken Xbox 360 consoles and often will not repair broken optical drives in the Xbox One. And newer models of the Xbox One come with a circuit board that verifies the presence of the optical drive. If the exemption is not given for consoles this year, those broken systems are not repairable except by Sony and Microsoft. Why do we care? Think about the implications of this for IT repair, because that's why you care. I talk about regulation on the show. If you're servicing IT systems, you should care about these implications and be looking for ways to get this addressed. That involves lobbying. The NSA has offered guidance on detecting and replacing old transport layer security protocol versions. The agency has released tools, network signatures, and server configurations designed to help government network owners with their security posture. Why do we care? A bit of blocking and tackling here, as these tools are available for anyone to use, and thus ones you can leverage on your own systems. Take advantage of your tax dollars at work. I wanted to cover this. The Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan Chase joint venture named Haven to disrupt healthcare is shutting down. The company will shut down by the end of the month after 3 years of apparently independent efforts. When launched, this effort caused shares of healthcare companies to tumble based on the danger of a technology finance alliance disrupting the space. Why do we care? Big tech can move whole industries with just announcements. Was this a real effort or just publicity stunt? If you hear that companies that don't actually work together on this, instead staying separated and 3 years later and have nothing to show for it, what can you take away from that? It instead disrupted the market just by a press release. Why we care is that when we talk about regulation, it's actions like this that show the power of big tech, and why I expect this to change this year. To start Thursday's news, let's talk about the tech impact about what happened at the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday. Twitter locked President Trump's Twitter account for 12 hours after posting lies about the results of the 2020 presidential election, which was scheduled to release that lock on Thursday. The company cited violations of its policies around disinformation. Facebook and Instagram also blocked the president, initially for a period of 24 hours, and then on Thursday announced it would be indefinite. The company is also reported to have been freezing comments on discussion threads internally from employees around calls to deplatform the president. YouTube also removed videos by the president. The Washington Post is reporting on the incident from a cybersecurity perspective, showing how the assault breached physical security and compromised the network. A computer was stolen from a senator's office, physical access was allowed as physical papers were opened and accessed, and the speed of the evacuation left computers unlocked. As another researcher stated, quote, "We watched a network breach in real time." So why do we care? Let's start by pouring one out for the poor IT staff of the Capitol who now have an entirely compromised network to handle from physical intrusion. Security starts entirely with physical security, and when that's been compromised, all is lost. You have a classic case study here for customers, as you can describe a breach in terms that will be incredibly relevant and understandable to anyone. I could dwell on the lessons, set auto lock policies, etc., but remember, all is lost regardless. Now onto the platforms. I'll remind everyone that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all private companies. This is not a public square. Additionally, shouting fire to cause a panic is a crime, even in a private space. If you don't see regulation coming here, you're not paying attention. The Wi-Fi Alliance has launched its Wi-Fi 6E certification program, which it announced on Thursday, January 7th. Just in time for CES 2021, this set the standards into Wi-Fi Certified 6, which the Alliance hopes will spur new devices. The certification focuses on standardizing security protocols, including the use of the new WPA3. Why do we care? A new wave of products to come into the market this year, and clearly opportunities to drive new solutions to customers. With CES next week, we'll have a lot to consider for the new year. Are there enough devices to warrant it now? Probably not, but this could well be a part of any office redesign too, as customers consider a post-pandemic use of their space. 3 updates to the SolarWinds hack. It's been revealed that the hackers potentially accessed about 3% of the Justice Department's Office 365 mailboxes, making the department at least the 8th U.S. government agency to reportedly be hit. SolarWinds has agreed to pay former CEO Kevin Thompson $314,500 for legal fees to help the company defend against investigations. Per CRN, quote, Thompson is to make himself available to SolarWinds for any investigations, litigation, arbitration, or civil and governmental proceedings based on events that occurred during his time as CEO from March 2010 to December 2020. Thompson will report directly to SolarWinds' board and devote the necessary time to performing services that are reasonably requested by the board. Thompson will not be required to take any action if his legal counsel believes the action requested by SolarWinds' board is against Thompson's interest, creates a conflict of interest between SolarWinds and Thompson, or otherwise exposes Thompson to any claim, penalty, or liability. Thompson received nearly $11.5 million in compensation from SolarWinds between 2017 and 2019, according to an SEC filing. Finally, data compiled by Census, a company that monitors the internet, reveals data about the number of Orion servers on the internet. 2 days before the breach, on December 15th, there were about 1,400 Orion servers exposed to the internet. That began to drop and hit a low of about 1,220 on December 28th. But as the new year came, on Monday, January 4th, there were 1,551 servers online. 10% more than before the breach disclosure. So why do we care? I want to start with the usage data, which is something I've been asked about by investors. Will customers leave SolarWinds? The answer short term appears to be no, in that these numbers at least indicate that users are not leaving the Orion products instantly. When they were told to power them down, it appears those systems were then powered back up. This is important to track for the long-term viability of that company. I've offered that their new leadership has a chance to clear the shelves of tainted Tylenol and make a massive pivot, that they could save themselves long-term if they pull it off. It's the path I see to survival. I'm just pointing out the protections, cooperations, or consulting SolarWinds is offering for its former CEO. I'll leave you, dear listener, to make your own judgment. Finally, the DOJ piece adds more to the statement. We're a long way from done on understanding what happened. Let's start out with some data from Absolute Software in their State of Endpoint Resilience report. The report focuses on the fact that endpoint complexity is itself a vulnerability and has gotten worse as driven by 3 factors. First, an increasing number of agents on devices, 10.2 on average, up from 9.8 last year. Device OS migration, resulting in fragmentation and stagnant patching practices. And finally, fragile security controls, which are in varying rates of decay and collision. Wonder how many applications are on a device? It's 96 on average, and 60% of breaches are linked to a vulnerability with a patch available but not applied, despite a 34% increase year over year in weekly costs dedicated to patching. So why do we care? It's no secret that I'm not excited by the core technologies that services most of the IT services space. That said, a core value tenet of what they do, manage this complexity, is very relevant. Let's ask the hard question. With this data being so well known and not new, is the problem the technologies being used or the people implementing them? The answer appears to be yes. There's still really a space for software vendors to be really good at solving this endpoint complexity problem, particularly around patching, and for those providers who really focus on being exceptional in this space. Maybe it's a stupid question, but rather than spending all this time building scripting and automation tools that don't get used, why doesn't someone just focus on making the patching problem so much easier? Anyone know how many Windows 7 machines are out there? ZDNet has been analyzing the data and have indicated that it is running on at least 100 million machines, and it could be more than 200 million. As a reminder, support for Windows 7 ended in January 2020. Referring back to the previous story, however, Absolute reports that 78% of enterprise devices are running Windows 10, up from 54% last year, although there are 491 total patch levels across those devices, and 90% of Windows 10 devices are running 2 or more versions behind. Why do we care? I put this second story to make two statements. First, seek out and upgrade those Windows 7 opportunities, but also contrast the data. Certainly in the enterprise, it's not as big as you might think based on that huge set of numbers. The ZDNet data is total market, the absolute data being enterprise. I'd offer that I think SMB splits somewhere between, which represents still an opportunity. Thus, the second statement. Take that earlier data about patching and status and get rid of this risk if you see it in your customers, and then sell reducing this portion of the risk by upgrades. Spiceworks Ziff Davis has given us some new data for 2021. A survey of 1,000 IT leaders finds that on average, spending on managed services will increase by about a percentage point from last year. 80% of businesses in North America and Europe anticipate year-over-year tech spending to stay the same or increase, putting these in line with IDC reports. So why do we care? This is encouraging data. Frankly, I was checking to make sure the market wouldn't contract, and it seems it will not, which is good news. I'll take this consistency as we enter 2021, considering the alternative. Every day I hope there's less to talk about with SolarWinds, and each day I'm a bit disappointed. The National Security Council has launched an investigation into what happened with a task force to coordinate and remediate the attack, which combines FBI, CISA, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the NSA. The CISA has discovered evidence of SAML authentication token abuse in the hack, and if attackers gained access to these tokens used for identity validation, each affected network is likely required to be fully rebuilt. The U.S. court has indicated that with the compromise of its systems, sealed court documents on file with the U.S. federal court system may have been exposed, and the branch has indicated it will be deploying more stringent controls going forward, including more sensitive data being moved offline. SolarWinds itself has hired former CISA leader Chris Krebs and Facebook Chief Security Officer Alex Stamos to assist with the investigation, cleanup, and best security practices. The company has also announced their 3 security priorities: securing their internal environment, enhancing the product development environment, and ensuring the security and integrity of the products the company delivers. Why do we care? Working backwards, bringing in high-profile security advisors is encouraging, and in particular, Stamos is known for speaking his mind and giving a clear perspective, so he will indicate if the company is not overcorrecting, as I hope they will. That's the path forward if they are to survive. It's pretty clear that any compromised network should be rebuilt. Sure, it's a big opportunity, but a highly regrettable one for sure. Finally, think about that move to going offline. Some organizations are recognizing that some data is too sensitive to keep online.